Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today. I'm Liz Kinsey and I'm the Managing Director of CRO, and today we've been joined by our guest who is Julia Cowan, and Julia Cowan is the Growth Officer for Tiller Technologies, and they provide digital ID verification. And when I hand over to Julia, she'll give you a bit of information about her background and how she's become a regulatory expert in that field. So this is our second lunchtime webinar. It is being recorded, so if anybody wants a copy of that afterwards, please contact me and I'll distribute that to you. Our next event will be held in November, and that will be on the Register of Overseas Entities. There's been some changes in that area, so we'll be covering how you can actually remove an overseas entity from the register if they no longer own property, and we'll be sending out invites near the time for that one. If you have any questions, we'll be doing this in two sessions. I'll be giving an overview of some changes in legislation and some areas that may require digital ID verification. And then I'll be handing over to Julia, who will be talking to us about their platform and how that can assist in your requirements. So if you've got any questions, if you want to put them in the box at the top, I'll take questions at the end of my session, and then Julia will take some questions at the end of her session as well. So why did we decide to cover this topic? And the topic today is KYC, how technology can improve onboarding, identifying and verifying your client's information. Well, recently we've started to use Tiller Technologies for our own AML requirements, and we also offer it as a service as well. And we just thought it would be useful to share this information because there are going to be some changes over the next year, and this may help you make decisions about how you will meet those requirements. And we're going to look at different areas where perhaps digital ID verification may be helpful, especially if you're not meeting your client on a face-to-face situation, then this may be an alternative solution for you. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, so just bear with me one moment. Okay, so hopefully you should be able to see that now. I'm just going to go into slideshow mode as well. Sorry, that's just a delay there. Right, there we go. So if we just look at the parts that I'm going to talk about first of all, firstly, we're going to look at the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, which was legislation that was introduced in October 2023, and how this legislation is going to affect KYC. We're also going to talk about ACSPs, who are Authorised Corporate Service Providers. This is a new requirement that will be with Companies House, and I'll explain how this may affect you as well. We'll have a talk about other areas like AML checks, which require identity verification, and then I'll pass over to Julia as well. So the ECCT Act, parts of this have been implemented already, but specifically today we're going to look at formal identity verification, or as it will be known as IDV. And this is a part of the Act which will be hopefully implemented next year. Companies House have said that it should be in place by the end of March 2025, but we don't think it will actually be used and that the legislation will be passed at that point. We're thinking it's probably going to be implemented around summertime next year. So IDV, formal identity verification, With Companies House, it will be to identify that the person is a real person. So it differs from AML requirements. Now, identifying them, it will either be through facial recognition apps, which we're going to look at today, or certified copies of a passport. So if you're meeting your clients directly, you can take a copy of the passport and certify it's a true likeness, and that can be uploaded to Companies House as proof that they're a real person as well. It will be a one-off requirement. So if you do have clients that are directors or PSCs of multiple companies, then you will only have to verify them once. They'll be issued with a unique code for themselves, and then they can use that code for the other companies that they're appointed to as well. And as I said, this is different from our anti-money laundering regulations. One example of that is it isn't risk-based. There's no address verification. So Companies House is specifically looking at whether it's a real person or not. So this will apply to all new and existing directors and PSCs of UK companies. They will have to have their identity verified. Also, anybody that files on behalf of somebody else will also have to have their identity verified as well. And that's when we'll be looking at ACSPs, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. So for anyone incorporating a company, the directors and PSCs will need to be identified before the company is incorporated, whereas at the moment we do checks, people like ourselves, company formation agents, we do the checks after the company has been incorporated. So this is a big change. This has all got to happen beforehand so that we've got this code so we can incorporate the company with those people involved. It also affects existing directors and PSCs, and that will be linked to their confirmation statement. So once this legislation comes into force, the next confirmation statement that's filed, all the directors and PSCs will also need to be IDV'd at that point as well. And as I'm sure you can imagine, there's a huge number of people that this is going to affect. It's a huge amount of work for Companies House. Once we've gone through a year's cycle, obviously everybody on the register at that point will be identified, and then it will become a little bit easier, but there will be that bit of pain to make sure that we've got everybody identified in the first place. As I said before, as part of this Act, some of the parts of the Act have already been enacted. But just to confirm again, for this, it's not been enacted yet, and we're looking at spring, summer next year. So it's something to start thinking about for next year. So why have Companies House gone down this route? Well, it's to help fight identity theft and identity fraud. You may have seen some news articles earlier on this year where famous chefs' identities were stolen, and people formed companies using famous people's names to form the company. Heston Blumenthal was one of them. The Ritz in London, they had their identity stolen as well. And people would form the companies, then they'd get suppliers to send them goods because suppliers wanted to deal with these high-profile chefs, and then obviously the invoices were never paid for those supplies. That's just an example. More commonly, it just happens to the general public, and there's very little that Companies House could do about this until this law has now come into place. So in the future, Companies House will play a greater role in preventing this type of abuse on the register, because everybody's identity is going to have to be confirmed. It means they can crack down on fraudulent activities a lot quicker, and it will improve the reliability and also the quality that's held on the register at Companies House. Now, this is a new concept for Companies House. People like ourselves, we're TCSPs, accountants, solicitors, we've had to fulfill these requirements for a long time now. But for Companies House, they didn't do any identity checks on anybody. So if somebody wanted to do something untoward, you could just go directly to Companies House, form a company without any ID checks taking place. So finally, something's being done about this, and the government have decided that this is the best way for them to do it, and they'll just be confirming that they are real people involved. So up until now, Companies House have had their hands tied. They do welcome this. They see this as a good change, and they're looking forward to being able to implement this and crack down on fraud as well, using the greater powers that they now have, which have been enabled through the implementation of this Act. I said before, it's a different concept to the anti-money laundering regulations. It's to confirm it's a real person, and that can be done through facial recognition apps or a certified copy of a passport. It applies to directors and PSCs of UK companies and those who file on behalf of those companies as well. So you may need to start making decisions about whether you feel you need to be registered as an ACSP. It also applies to new and existing companies, and it will be a one-off requirement as well. So there will be two identification routes. People can do it directly with Companies House. They've got a third-party supplier that they've put in place that's developing the technology for them. So people can go directly to Companies House and have their identity verified, and that will produce a code for them. But that's all they'll get. You won't receive a report that you can use for other purposes. So you may want to actually register as an ACSP, an authorised corporate service provider, and make sure that you do the due diligence yourself, because you're going to have to for anti-money laundering regulations anyway. Once they decide on a date for the implementation, they'll open a window. They said that they'll give 3 months for any ACSP to register, so that on day one, we're all ready to IDV our clients. So why are they doing this? Well, this will help prevent anonymous filing, so you can't have the situation where someone can pretend to be someone else and register a company in the future. So to be an ACSP, they've said that any ACSP needs to operate at the same standard as Companies House. I think we can all agree that we will be operating at a higher standard, because we have to do more as our KYC. Our due diligence is a lot more complex than that, and we do further checks. So I think we can safely say that we will be operating at a higher standard than Companies House. An ACSP must be based in the UK as well, so you can't have overseas agents fulfilling this service. And any ACSP has to be supervised by a UK AML supervisor. So whether it's the body that you belong to, for us it's HMRC that we're supervised for, and you have to be supervised to make a successful application to Companies House. They will check that company or the ACSP is supervised, and they will check on an ongoing basis to make sure that that's not lapsed either. And there will also be a fit and proper test, and as I said, this is to prevent those that are not authorised from being able to file on behalf of others. So an ACSP can be an individual, and if it is, then they would be IDV'd as well to file on behalf of others. Or it can be a non-individual, so it could be an LLP or a limited company. And in that case, one of the directors or members or PSC would need to be IDV'd as part of the registration. And there'll be ongoing monitoring then to make sure, like I said, that they maintain those standards. But there will be IDV on behalf of a company or an LLP. But then anybody that's employed by that company will be able to file on behalf of their clients. Just wanted to mention as well that there is a second part to being an ACSP. So if you decide that you won't be IDVing your clients, it might be that the association that you're registered with, your professional body, have advised that you shouldn't really conduct that IDV. There will be a second part that will probably come in about 6 months after IDV is in place, and it's called the presenters legislation. And that idea is that once that's enacted, only ACSPs will be able to file documents on behalf of their clients. And the kind of documents that they're talking about are incorporations, accounts, confirmation statements, charges and insolvency documentation. But that isn't a full list, but it will definitely include those elements. So if you don't want to do IDV, and you do file documents on behalf of your clients, you will at some stage have to register as an ACSP to be able to continue to file those documents. So I just wanted to add that in there. It's got nothing to do with IDV, but it is about becoming an ACSP. So I think it's quite important. So just to summarise about ACSPs, because I've thrown quite a lot of information at you there, hopefully be implemented in the summer next year. It's to verify that a director or PSC is a real person, and that will be through facial recognition at or a certified copy of a passport. A company can file for themselves, or they can use an ACSP if they choose, and the ACSP must be registered under anti-money laundering regulations and be supervised, and the ACSP must register with Companies House as well. So as you can see, I think it's really important to start having those conversations about whether you're going to do IDV, how you're going to do IDV. And as I said, Julie is going to be talking about one way that that can happen in the future. You can't always meet your clients face to face, so by using digital ID verification, that's one way that you can make sure that you've met the requirements with Companies House. Other legislation that's there for us to follow is anti-money laundering regulations. There are different rules depending on what industry you're in and different guidance. That guidance can be vague. There is risk-based analysis there and different elements which include now whether it's a real person, address verification, PEPs and sanctions, the location and nationality of the individual in question, and then questioning what service you're providing. So how far do you need to go with your due diligence, and also the value of the order as well. And then there's rechecking as well. So how often do you need to recheck that client? We need to make sure that nothing's come up in PEPs and sanctions. Has anything changed? Has their address changed? And making sure that that element is there as well to ensure that we are fulfilling the requirements. Record keeping is very important. It will be very important for the IDV with Companies House as well. They're talking about keeping records for about 5 years, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. There are different rules depending on which legislation we're looking at, different procedures, there's onboarding, different types of checks that can take place, and different guidance depending on which industry you're in. Also, policies need to be kept and risk analysis as well. And then we need to keep a record of the checks that we've completed, any decisions that have been made. So if it's come up as a referral, how have we dealt with that and what decisions have been made? And then keeping tracks of any changes that are made to the information that we're keeping for that client as well. And then the length of time to keep any of those records. There's also another piece of legislation, which I said at the beginning I'll be doing another seminar on in November, which is the Register of Overseas Entities. Now, this was legislation that came in 2022, and it was to do with overseas entities owning property or land in the UK. And it was on the back of the war between Russia and the Ukraine and applying sanctions and not knowing who owned certain properties because they were hiding behind an overseas entity. So between Companies House and the Land Registry, they decided to hold a register at Companies House, which declared who the registrable beneficial owners of these overseas entities were. But they weren't just going to take people's words for it. So agents were registered with Companies House who had to complete verification checks on these people to ensure that they were real people, and also that they were the registrable beneficial owners as well. So this was the first time that we've seen this kind of verification with Companies House. The agent must be registered with Companies House. They have to make a statement saying they've completed the verification on the people who they're registering. And again, the records needed to be kept for 5 years. So that's another area where this due diligence comes into effect as well. So I've gone through a lot very quickly. We've looked at the ECCT Act. We've seen what that means to you and how that can affect you and your clients next year. I've given you an overview of ACSPs as well, so that's something for you to think about, whether you want to conduct IDV yourselves or use an agent to do that. We've talked about other types of requirements like anti-money laundering regulations and the Register of Overseas Entities. So I am now going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to have a look and see if we've got any questions in the chat. So we've got a couple of questions here. Just to recap again, we haven't got an exact date for when the ECCT Act will apply to identity verification. So I can send more updates as they happen throughout the year. It is dependent on secondary legislation as well, and obviously we've had a change with government. So there's no exact date, but the government have posted as part of their business plan with Companies House that they aim to have this up and running by the end of March, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be live. And then somebody was asking about whether you can register now as an ACSP. You can't register yet. This is a new requirement. So once they give us a date, they will open a window, which they say will be about 3 months before it goes live. Then people will be able to register as an ACSP. And again, we will send out more information on that when that's available. So that brings, oh, sorry, just one more question's just appeared, I think. Somebody's asking if we can do everything for you. Yes, if you're a client of ours, then yes, we can definitely take care of all of that for you. And then there's another question here. Sorry, when onboarding new clients, I can't see the entire question actually. Not quite sure how I see that. Maybe if I click. When onboarding new clients that are existing companies, does the client give us their codes, or can the firm redo the checks? The checks can be redone, that's not a problem, but I think it would probably be simpler if your client's already gone to Companies House and completed their IDV, then they can just give you the code and then you'd be able to file their confirmation statement or whatever you needed to file to be able to fulfill that requirement. So yes, it's a bit like the authentication code, so people can pass that on to others when needed. So I'm now going to pass you over to Julia, and she's going to talk a bit more about the technology and how that all works.
Thank you, Liz. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time and for having me as a guest today. I'm just going to start by introducing myself. So as Liz said, I work for Tiller Technologies, and we are the provider of ID verification solutions to CRO. To give you a little bit of background about me, I've worked in financial services for more years than I'd probably like to admit. I originally worked in private banking in a client-facing role for Coutts, and then I moved on and worked in investment banking for Goldman Sachs, supporting the head of internal audit, and then moving into the executive office. And I've done a number of contract roles over the years with lots of different companies such as Barclays, PIMCO, Schroders, BNP Paribas, and many others. And lastly, I worked for Amundi Asset Management in London, which is their asset management arm of Crédit Agricole, before I moved back to Jersey, which is where I grew up, and started my career working in technology. And I worked for CPA Global, which is probably the biggest IP legal technology solutions provider in the world. And I joined Tiller Technologies about 18 months ago. The reason I'm sharing all of this with you is because I wanted to explain how I really have first-hand experience of dealing with customers, dealing with KYC, and I really understand the importance of ensuring that your customer has a really great experience, whilst you also feel really comfortable that you're meeting your regulatory responsibilities with KYC and AML. So that's me. I'm going to share a little bit more about Tiller now. So we're headquartered here in Jersey, and we have a team of international experts, some here in Jersey, some in the UK, and we've got lots of developers sitting over in India also. The interesting thing about being a Jersey-based business is that we, obviously sitting in an offshore location, we are under very stringent regulations from the JFSC around money laundering and AML, and it's pretty vigorous. And so from early on, we decided when we were developing our solutions that we really wanted to make sure that our technology meets the very highest regulatory standards internationally, and that it's okay and viable for customers in the UK, but also in Jersey and Guernsey and the Cayman Islands and Bermuda, because we've got customers in all of those different locations. We're not just a bunch of techie geeks either. As I've explained, I come from a finance background, but so do many of the other staff that work within the business. So we've really got that foundation. And Tiller was founded back in 2019 and specializes really originally in customer onboarding technology, specifically for regulated and supervised businesses. Originally working with a small number of clients with really specific bespoke requirements and building solutions that met those specific requirements. And around 5 years ago, we started doing that, and all of those different solutions always incorporated elements of EID. So we've been doing EID now for around 5 years. But in January of 2023, we launched Verify by Tiller, which is the solution that CRO uses, which is our first ever SaaS solution, which is pure unadulterated EID. And that supports a much larger number of customers in various different industries, including law and accounting, trust and fiduciary services, fund administration, and other areas of finance. We even have a few estate agents and some recruitment agencies who use our service. The other thing that coming from Jersey has really made us focus on is our ability to deliver international address verification services. So on the solution side, we've built solutions for people like Mattioli Woods with their digital wealth service, but we also built the address verification solution that powers the HSBC expat onboarding, and that actually is channeled through Jersey. And so with that in mind, and with our position in the Channel Islands, we've really built a solution that delivers what we believe to be the very best international address verification service on the market. So we've got experience of being on your side of the fence. We leverage that knowledge and experience to build solutions to problems that we really know and understand. And when developing technology, we really ask 3 fundamental questions. The first is it easy to use? The second is, does it deliver a great end customer experience? And thirdly, is it helping our clients to better meet their regulatory requirements? So let's talk about the customers for a moment. So quite often when I do these presentations, we'll get pushback from someone who says, our clients don't want to use technology. Our clients like to come in and see us. And of course, that's very, very true. But it's an exception these days rather than a rule. And the reason I say that is because the research really supports it. We have customers who often say, oh, we have older clients who don't know how to use technology. And we actually have a customer in Jersey who has found a workaround because they really want to benefit from the robustness of the digital checks, but at the same time deliver a great customer experience. And the workaround that they've developed is to have their receptionist armed with the Verify solution on her desktop and a mobile phone. So when older clients come in, she makes them a cup of tea, sits down with them, and actually just takes them through the checks on the app in the office. So you can actually work it both ways, which I think they did brilliantly. So as you can see, these are some of the statistics that just really support that statement that actually customers are beginning to prefer using technology. So in some situations, in B2B, for example, the expectation of using technology is very clearly already well established. However, when we're talking about end customers who are private individuals, that's a slightly different scenario. However, when we think about that also, we know that customers now want things that are much more convenient. And that behavior and that expectation is changing due to the changes that have come within the technology. And people in general just being more tech savvy. And I think also, obviously, with COVID, it's accelerated people's adoption of technology. I think other examples where technology is becoming more commonplace is around the use of mobile banking and payment apps. With Revolut, for example, they've managed to onboard 15 million customers around the world without ever having to meet them face to face, which is quite an extraordinary example. So talking about the customer again, I think what's really beneficial to them is the convenience. They can use this app from any location. They can do it in the office. They can use it in the car, at home, in between meetings. They can do it on the sofa at any time, any day. It's totally convenient to them. And it only takes around 3 to 5 minutes for them to complete the mobile journey. Using technology as well, the other benefit is actually it is more secure to use an app rather than to put personal information perhaps in the post or over an email, which can be intercepted. So the mobile app is a much more secure channel for sharing that information. So let's look at the technology now in a little more detail. I'm not going to give you a demo today. I'm just going to walk you through all the different features that are included in our core service and explain what they do and why. So Verify's purpose is simply to remotely confirm that your client is exactly who they say they are, so that you can confidently know that you've met your requirements for KYC and obviously the requirements that Liz has mentioned also for Companies House. So as you can see on this slide, there are a number of different pieces of technology that come together to make this all happen, such as biometrics, live detection, and NFC chip technology. And much of this technology you'll actually already be familiar with. So to initiate the process, effectively, an email goes out to your customer requesting them to download the app from the App Store. Once they've downloaded it, they will use a one-time passcode, which is also included in that email, to connect what it is that you require from them, and what you have requested will then be uploaded onto the mobile app, so all their information will be coming in through the back end in terms of what you're expecting them to do and what you're expecting to see. So step one, the customer just takes a scan of their passport, driving license, or government ID using the camera on the app. What is then happening is that that information is uploaded and electronically compared against a government issued template for that particular document to check that the document is genuine. So that means checking for security features such as foils, holograms, watermarks, fonts, pictures, making sure everything's all in the right place. This is exactly the same technology that is used when you pass through an e-gate in an airport and you're asked to put your passport on the little piece of glass. So what is happening there is that the text on the document is being read using optical character recognition technology, or OCR. And if you've ever been caught by a speeding camera, which I'm sure none of you have, it's that technology that reads your number plate and then feeds into the database to pull up your personal information so they can so quickly send you that bill in the post. So that's exactly the same technology that's lifting all the information off the document. So not only is the ID document tested for authenticity against the government template, but because the data on it is held electronically, it can now be processed as well in the background. And we can test for things like, has the document expired? Is the person under the age of 18? Or are there any other soft flags that you might be looking for? So our technology can cater for detecting information on documents from 164 countries around the world, which is around 1,500 different document types that we can look at. So OCR technology is great, but there's something even more powerful, which is NFC chip reading capabilities. And Verify can do both. So there's two separate processes going on here. The first step is to confirm that the person presenting the document is the exact same person that is within the document, to make sure that it's not stolen. That's that identity check, to make sure that the identity isn't being stolen. And this is done through the biometric face matching technology, whereby the customer is asked to look at the camera and take a selfie. And then with the selfie that we've taken, we can compare that against the image that's held in the document. And even better, if we've had that technology and we've managed to use the NFC chip, that we can check it against the original photograph that's held on the chip also. The only problem is that that biometric test doesn't do the liveness check. It doesn't check that that person is alive. So there is an additional check there, which you'll be familiar with, which is the look up, look down, blink, smile, frown type of check that you might use whilst using a payment app, for example. So we'll also do that to check that the person is alive. And now that section is complete, we've verified that the ID document is true and correct because we've checked that against the official government templates. We've also checked that the information on it has now been captured using that OCR technology, and hopefully we've lifted even more information off the NFC chip, which is really the gold standard. The way that we do the NFC chip, by the way, is it's very simple. You get asked to hold your mobile phone and you simply place your passport document on it, and it will read the technology that's on the chip. And that's the same kind of technology that we use when we make a digital payment in a shop. So it's extremely reliable and very robust. We've also now checked that the person carrying out the check is the same person that is within the document. So that's the ID check done. Believe it or not, all that technology that goes into the ID check is not the most difficult part when we talk about EID as technologists. It's actually much more challenging to do the address verification check. Now, it's slightly ironic given that when we look at the paper process and the original way in which we capture this information, traditionally the address verification and the proof of address, shall we say, is much, much easier for fraudsters to to circumnavigate using things like Photoshop, and there are no reliable databases for things like electricity bills. So if an electricity bill has been whipped up on Photoshop, there's really no way of you knowing unless there's something that doesn't quite match up when you're assessing it in person. However, with the digital address verification check, we circumnavigate the customer completely and we go directly to the data source. So we go directly out to what we call regulatory quality data sources. So those are databases that are either a government database, it might be a voting registry, it might also be a utility company registry, so an electricity company, for example, and we use APIs to call their database to check, does this person exist? And do they live at this address, yes or no? And that's how we can confirm directly, without involving the customer, whether or not they actually live at the address that they say to. And this is quite clearly a much more robust way of checking this, rather than relying on a sort of utility bill. I think from a convenience perspective as well, asking customers to provide utility bills is actually becoming a bit of a difficult task, given that a lot of us are on paperless, for example. We don't always have those utility bills hanging around, and then of course it's got to be dated within the last 3 months, which can also cause problems. So this is a much easier way of doing it for the customer as well. So the first step for this is essentially we ask the customer to input their address into the system. And it's very similar to the way that you would use a sat nav. So you're adding the first line of the address in, or the postcode, and it's giving you a drop-down list, and you select the address off that list. And the second part is that once we know the address and we've confirmed that that address actually exists, we then do that database check to ensure that the name of that person is aligned to that address in the database. Now, it's relatively easy to do this in the UK and in countries like the US, for example. It's a lot more difficult to do this internationally in other countries that perhaps don't have such reliable data sources. And so with Verify, we're extremely proud actually of the fact that we can cover 53 different countries worldwide. And we are currently working to be the first ever solution to be able to access reliable data within the UAE. So further to this enhanced check, there's another layer, because we know that the regulators love us to layer all the checks and give as much information as possible. So one of the other features that Verify includes is the geolocation chip. So once they log in, they will get a prompt to say, are you happy for us to access the data within the phone? That's the geolocation data. And so as part of that check, it will ping the geolocation chip within the phone, and that will also be recorded and included in the report. So from a regulatory perspective, we're cutting out the customer, we're going straight to the data source, and that risk of document fraud is significantly reduced. So if we go back to talking about ID documents, could you recognize a fake? If we're comparing the original old school process with the digital process, with the rise of AI, actually it's becoming easier for people to do all this spoofing. And it's becoming much, much harder for us to spot fakes. So with the use of these reference templates, the tamper detection, the chip reading, the layering of checks, even a really experienced customs officer would struggle to outperform this technology. It's just that good at detecting fakes. So as lawyers and accountants, I'm sure you're often asked to certify copies of passports and other documents. And we have customers now using our technology to give them assurance before they do this for their customers. Even within our own business, our former CFO was asked to certify a shareholder's ID recently. And as a UK accountant, they'd never seen a Venezuelan passport before and naturally hesitated. But luckily, we had Verify on hand to help him out with that. So in addition to the ID and the address verification, we also provide a PEP and sanctions and adverse media check service to CRO and other customers, which provides an important additional layer of due diligence. And the sources that we reference for those checks are things like the CIA World Leaders and CIA World Factbook, and rulers and articles and government and official websites that cover all levels of PEPs. Our adverse media checks scan about 120,000 different media sources, which equates to around 2.5 billion news articles, which is pretty comprehensive. So once all the checks have been completed, you'll receive the PDF report. Now, this is around 10 pages long and is increasingly becoming the preferred form for the regulators to show absolutely all the detail on the checks that you've performed. So what's going into this report is all the information that we've collected on your customers, but also all the results of the checks and verifications that we've done on those different elements. It's pretty meticulous, and all the data that we collect through this process is delivered through the report, and then all the data is automatically deleted from our database after a maximum of 60 days, therefore making GDPR and data protection significantly easier to manage. So in summary, I hope you agree, it's quick and easy to use, and it does deliver a great customer experience, and it helps you to better meet the regulatory requirements. As an offshore-based company, many of our clients are all in a similar boat, meaning that we've had to design this for international customers, as I've mentioned. Our international address verification service is delivered to about 45,000 customers every year to the HSBC service, which proves that the technology works well, I think. And of course, we're dealing with cross-jurisdictional transactions where compliance is always a concern. And that's it, Liz. That's all I've got for you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm sure everybody will agree that that was just so interesting. And although, it's been a while since you've gone through it with me, but yeah, I mean, this is why we've decided to go down this route, because it's just so comprehensive, and we feel that that's the right path for us to have followed. Have got a couple of questions. Oh, no, got a few more now. How does the report from the app on the client's phone arrive at my office? So the way that we deal with it, and then Julia can say if you're dealing with them directly. I think you can have a portal if you're dealing with them directly, and all the reports are in there. On our system, you have an account, so you place the orders on your account. You put an email address in, which is sent to your client. So they complete their checks, but the report goes directly to you, not to the client. So that's how we deal with things here. I'll just go through a few more. We've got quite a bit longer yet. When will this system
is with us on the direct service? Because it's slightly different, isn't it, to how it works for you? So as Liz quite rightly said, we have a customer portal that you would log into in order to initiate the checks, but that's also where the results of the checks flow back into. The other thing that we do, which Liz takes absolute advantage of at CRO, is the use of our open APIs. So that's how Liz's system is able to speak very comprehensively with ours. So that's how all the information flows from Verify into CRO effectively, doesn't it?
Yes. Somebody's asked the question, when will this system be available to use? Well, it's available to use straight away. Like I say, you can either set up directly with Tiller, or it's available to use for your clients on our portal as well. Somebody asked about phone compatibility. As far as I'm aware, because I got asked this question yesterday, it's compatible with iPhone and Android, but it depends whether it's an old phone or a new phone. I think that if it's an older phone, sometimes there can be some issues because it hasn't got the new technology on it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think that I'm not exactly sure of how old is too old, but I'm assured by our technologists that most modern smartphones will work as long as they're not sort of first generation.
Right, good. Somebody said you mentioned Revolut. They're the biggest software app provider used by scammers in the UK. And distrust and caution is something our clients express when being asked to use online facilities. How does your technology interface in terms of fostering trust? Can the user do their own checks before submitting their personal information and documents?
Gosh, there's a lot in that question. It's a big one. How do we foster trust? Was that the first question?
Yeah, I think maybe answer that part, and then all the questions, if we don't get round to them today, we have a copy of the questions so we can get back to people individually as well.
Sure. I think if the question is how do we assure our customers that the technology does what it says it does? So when we talk, we spend a lot of time talking to compliance officers in various different organisations, and the first question we get asked is, how does it meet the regulations? How do we know that it meets, the specific regulations for that jurisdiction? And quite simply, the regulator puts the onus on the business purchasing the technology to ensure that they're comfortable that the technology meets the requirements. And that's why we take a lot of steps to do very explicit demos and to talk people through how the technology works. But we also asked BDO to map. We've used the JFSC handbook as the sort of blueprint for sort of the highest level of regulatory checks. And so, as I mentioned, we wanted to make sure that if we could meet those regulations, we can pretty well meet any other regulations from any other regulator around the world. And we had BDO map our service to the handbook here in Jersey, and we were found to be 100% compliant. So we're quite happy to go through. We also share a lot of information around our data sources and our data policy and all the rest of it to ensure that we're absolutely transparent with our customers as to how our service operates and what security measures we've got in place. So that's the first question, I think. There was a second element to it around, just remind me, Liz.
Yeah, sorry, I've come out of that one now. I've lost the questions. Quite a lot of questions in here. Sorry, for the second part of that, I'll go back to that person with by email and make sure that we answer both parts of that. We'll just take a couple more questions now. One question is, are copies of the passport shown within the document?
Yes, absolutely. There's a high resolution image of the passport. There is also all the line data that is lifted off the passport, which is specified next to the image of the passport. You then also have a copy of the photograph that was captured during the photographic journey. So we've got the still image of the individual, an up close image of the photograph that's on the passport surface, so the document as it's been lifted. You also then get the photograph and all the information that is embedded in the NFC chip as well. So you're getting layers of information all lifted from that one process.
Yeah, we have some example reports as well. If anybody's interested, then I'm happy to share those as well. Another question is, does checking the client's ID trigger a mark on their credit file? I think that's quite an important question.
Yeah, no, that's not connected to credit or anything like that, no.
Okay. And last question, your verification technology, is it recognised by the professional bodies in the UK? The example they gave was ACCA.
Mhm.
I know that it is recognised by ICAEW.
It is. It's accredited by the ICAEW. Um, with a number of bodies, particularly people like the FCA, they will never actually call out specific technology providers as being better than others. Again, they put that emphasis upon you as the consumer to do your homework and your due diligence to be sure that you're comfortable that our technology meets the requirements. And of course, we help you through that process as much as we can.
Okay. Right, well, I think that brings us to an end. Thank you for answering all those questions. I know it's really hard when you're just being fired at. We will get back to everybody that has asked a question and answer your questions fully. There have been some questions about pricing for our doing it through our portal. For a UK person, it's £9.95 for this comprehensive check. But I'll get back to the people that have asked about the pricing as well. And lastly, just want to say thank you once again to Julia for your time today. It's been a really interesting presentation, so thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Like I say, I'll get back to you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.